All right, day two of space news. My name's Mike. I read the news, so you don't have to. Let's get into an Ars Technical article. Today, we're going to talk about this rocket report, a new estimate of Starship costs, and Japan launches a spy satellite. If you see the asterisk beside the two, it's because I have already recorded 13 days worth of space news, and I had to privatize all of them because they're for safety concerns. So don't do that. Don't be dumb. Anyways, let's get into it. One space tug company runs into financial problems. Another says, go big or go home. Space tug company. I assume they're referring to tugboats. An HIIA rocket lifts off with the IGS Optical 8 spy satellite. I presume this is a Japanese launch company. Let's have a look. It's quite a cool picture. A big cloud of smoke shooting off to the right. Welcome to edition 6.27 of the Rocket Report. Okay, so in previous episodes that you will never see, I was always wondering what the number meant. So like I saw 6.13 or 6.49. I'm now starting to gather that 6 is the season, 27 is the episode. I thought there was some like rocket related meme, essentially. I thought it was a meme. It is not. Also, this is by Stephen Clark. I want to give the author some due credit. Back to the article. This week we discuss an intriguing new report looking at Starship. Most fascinating, the report covers SpaceX's cost to build a Starship, which, by the way, if you haven't seen, has something like 13 engines on the first stage and 6 engines on the second. Absolutely mind-boggling. And how these costs will come down as the company ramps up its build and launch cadence. They are looking to launch, I think, twice a day eventually in 24, 25. And then at that point, you run into other difficulties than having the ships available. You run into difficulties preparing the launch site. Post-launch, how do you get the vehicle out of there and get the other one in as quickly as possible so you can start prepping? At the other end of the spectrum, former NASA administrator. Oh, and there was an article recently. Like we reread one again, an episode you're never going to see, where it talked about how Vandenberg needs like millions and millions of dollars, maybe billions, to revamp the base because it just can't take more than something like 25, let's say 100 launches a year. I don't remember the exact number, but it's a lot less than the number of launches that these private space companies want to be making in the near future. At the other end of the spectrum, former NASA administrator Mike Griffin has a plan to get astronauts back to the moon that would wholly ignore the opportunities afforded by Starship. As always, we welcome reader submissions. Each report will include. Okay, so the problem at America's military spaceports. The Biden administration is requesting $1.3 billion over the next 5 years to revamp infrastructure at the space ranges in Florida and California. So what we just talked about. This will help address things like roads, bridges, utilities, and airfields that in many cases haven't seen an update in decades. But it's not enough. According to Space Force, last year, Cape Canaveral was the departure of 72 orbital rocket launches, and officials anticipated more than 100 this year in 24. The infrastructure and workforce at the Florida spaceport could support about 150 launches in a year without major change, but launch activity is likely to exceed that in a few years. Again, the trajectory is going to be, one launch a day, 300-ish launches, pushing to potentially 600 launches eventually. Okay, so now that I think about that, I think I saw it was something like 350 to 400 launches by 25, 26. So that'd be about a launch a day, not 2 launches a day. That does change in scale. Higher fees incoming. Isn't good for satellite providers and the payload companies that rely on the satellite providers. Um, and the payload companies that are small startups often that just need to get their stuff into space. So higher fees incoming. Commercial launch companies operating from Cape Canaveral out on the East Coast and in Florida, or Vandenberg, which is out in California, pay fees to Space Force to reimburse for direct cost related to rocket launches. These cover expenses like forecasting services, surveillance, which are airplanes and boats data restricted areas, and range safety support. I would almost essentially kind of consider these military or policing services. And apparently, I've had friends that have gone on, Canadian friends that have gone on base, and at one of them, I think it was Vandenberg, they were followed around. They had a military escort the entire time. They also commented at the propensity of SpaceX advertisements everywhere. Like apparently even the soap dispenser had a SpaceX logo on it. So they're very proud of who they are and what they do, which they do some very cool stuff. What that typically meant was anything we did that was specifically dedicated to that launch. Okay, cool. This is about to change after legislation passed by Congress in December allows Space Force to charge indirect fees to commercial providers. This money will go into a fund to pay for maintenance and upgrades to infrastructure used by all launch companies at the spaceports. Okay, so they're going to charge more money so they can create a pool for infrastructure development. But originally they weren't allowed to do this. They had to just charge what was directly related to the launch itself. All right, we've kind of moved on to a different topic. Momentus is running out of money. So Momentus, let's have a quick gander at their website. Powering in-space transportation. And I like on their page, if you scroll down even a little, first thing you see is investors. Well, if they're running out of money, that would make sense. Let's see their services. They're booking June and October 24 missions. I mean, if they're booking June missions. Momentus plans to offer in-space infrastructure services by building transfer and service vehicles that will carry satellites and hosted payloads between orbits in space. Momentus plans to offer the backbone infrastructure services that can empower delivery services, provide point-to-point transportation and deployment of the customer payload into the desired orbit. Hosted services provide orbit transfer, maintenance, attitude control, and power communication interfaces. So, as in their satellite will move other satellites, which is what I see here. So, I wonder, does this company, do you launch your satellite connected to their satellite, and then their satellite will handle the orbital transfer, and then drop your satellite off, and then their satellite goes away? Or does it actually come and get your satellite while you're in space? Let's say you're at the end of your 5-year mission, but your cameras still work, you're able to perform Earth observation, but you need to get moved up another 30 kilometers in order for your science to make sense. Will they come and grab you and essentially accelerate you enough to re-enter the altitude you want? I'm curious. It's not really clear from their website. Maybe we can learn more from their CEO,
I'm John
Rood,
CEO of Momentus. After a long career in government service, most recently as an Undersecretary of Defense, I was drawn to join the team at Momentus because I wanted to be part of one of the companies at the forefront of the new and growing space economy. This is an exciting time in the space industry.
You can tell he's reading a script.
We're in the early stages of what we expect to be a substantial expansion in the number of users of space and new ways and new technologies that will change how we operate in space. While I previously worked as an executive at Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, two large aerospace companies,
I want to be able to skip.
There's one simple hearing hack anyone can.
Sorry for throwing an advertisement your way.
wanted to join the team at Momentus. across space, including in-space transportation, hosted payloads, and
Look at
in-orbit
camera.
service.
I guess
Momentous
I'll-
plans to make access to space significantly more affordable by combining rideshare launch with low-cost, last-mile delivery
rideshare launch.
custom orbit. Then the supporting logistics of insignificant microwave electrothermal thruster, or MET, that uses water as a propeller. The MET propulsion has been under development since 2017, and we're currently in the final stages of an extensive ground test campaign for our latest generation thruster. When this technology is matured,
Cool. It is
we
a cool
believe
photo.
it will be low cost, efficient, safe, reusable, and scalable, and will have the performance.
Okay. So apparently they're running out of money. So Momentus, a company that specializes in last mile satellite delivery services. So you get launched into a certain place in orbit, and they'll get you. They'll move your satellite somewhere else to a different altitude. Announced that on January 12th, it is running out of money and does not have a financial lifeline. The company was once valued at more than $1 billion before going public via SPAC. One of the classic SPAC space companies, 21. We looked at this yesterday. When was this Spire SPAC? I think it was in 21 as well. Yeah. But has now has a market capitalization of less than 10 million. Momentus has developed a space tug called Vigoride. I think it's Vigoride. Designed to place small satellites into bespoke orbits after deploying from a larger rocket on a rideshare mission. That's a good way to put it. You're putting smaller satellites into orbits that typically the Falcon 9 missions or wherever these rockets are launching won't go. You can change the apoapsis and periapsis of your orbit by accelerating at certain points within your current trajectory. And perhaps there's a reason you want something more, an orbit that's more elliptical, or you need to be in a certain orbit for. You need if the SpaceX vehicles are always launching around 450 kilometers, but you really need to be at 475. This will get you there. So now Momentus is abandoning plans for its next mission that was due for launch in March. And in December, the company laid off about 20%. Fatal blow. Momentus may have received a potentially fatal blow after losing the U.S. Space Development Agency's recent competition for 18 so-called Tranche 2 satellites. Instead, the SDA made recent satellite manufacturing contract awards to Rocket Lab, L3Harris, Lockheed Martin, and Sierra Space. On Wednesday, Momentus announced it closed a $4 million stock sale. This should keep Momentus afloat for a while longer, but won't provide the level of capital needed to undertake significant manufacturing or technical development work. So they just need to get some sales. They have no deep tech. At this point, they can't afford it. Also, I do apologize. My microphone was on the other side of my desk this entire time. I'm sure this episode was terrible. Orbex may go bigger. So on the opposite side of the spectrum, the UK-based launch startup Orbex hasn't yet flown its small satellite launcher, called Prime, but it's also looking at what's next, according to new Orbex CEO Phil Chambers, who was officially appointed this month, told Financial Times that the company was already discussing developing a larger vehicle. So while future growth is on Orbex's radar, its near-term focus is completing the construction of a spaceport in Scotland. This is pretty cool. Scotland actually has many space companies. A couple that come to mind, they have Clyde Space and Spire right next to each other in Glasgow, at a building in Glasgow. And they do some cool stuff. I've actually visited one of them, and they have a picture of the Queen after she visited their facility for 3 years ago. Something like that, prior to her unfortunate departure. The two-stage Prime rocket fueled by biopropane, will be capable of hauling a payload of approximately 180 kilograms into LEO. But Orbex has been shy about releasing updates on the progress of the Prime rocket's development since unveiling a full-scale mock-up of the launch vehicle in 2022. Last year, the CEO resigned, but the most significant funding round was valued at £40.4 million in late 2022. Okay, so it's interesting to see the scales. You have this UK company that, I mean, it is a startup, but it's valued at about £40 million, and then the other company in this article was valued at $1 billion. Momentus. It's just mind-boggling to see these scales. Like the American companies, they just all seem to be worth $1 billion, $2 billion, unicorns. I don't know if it's funding. I mean, they very well could be in and are probably in very different stages of their life. Orbex is how old? Momentus said 2016. They were already doing research on their propulsion systems, so you would assume they were founded around then or sooner. Whereas Orbex was founded in 2015. So both of these companies, Momentus. When are you founded, Momentus? Is there no about contact? Is there a wiki? Maybe probably not. Space. I mean, it's $1 billion company. Well, it was. History. So Momentus was a 2018 graduate of Y Combinator. It's younger, pretty much than Orbex, this British startup, and one's currently worth 44, and the other one was valued at 1 billion after the same amount of time, roughly. That's okay. Hello, Helios. Impulse Space, a company founded by veteran SpaceX engineer Tom Mueller, flew its first small space tug to orbit last year. Now, Mueller's company is eyeing a bigger prize. This week, Impulse Space could develop a much larger vehicle called Helios, a space tug that essentially acts as a third stage when launched on top of SpaceX Falcon 9. So it can mate with a series of rockets. You obviously want to be able to work with all of the major providers: SpaceX, Rocket Lab, ULA, that new company Fireship, Blue Origin, once they get a rocket off the ground. For example, Helios could take over propulsion responsibilities after deploying from a Falcon 9 and then ferry a large satellite of up to 4 tons into geostationary orbit. Awesome. Ferry a large satellite of up to 4 tons. Without Helios, the satellite would need to use its own propellant for orbit raising or fly a more expensive Falcon Heavy rocket. That's the question with these tug companies. Is it not better for these satellites to just design to have their own propulsion system, which they may want anyway for orbit keeping? Or does it make sense for them to rely on this third-party provider to push them to a kind of an initial starting altitude that they like, or initial orbit that they like? Describing Deneb, Helios will be powered by one of the most robust in-space engines ever built. So all of these tug companies seem to talk about, they seem to be centered around their engine. Are they all built in-house? Is no one offering kind of state-of-the-art engines to these companies for a reasonable price? I know engine design 2 years ago for the Americans, the SpaceX, there was a big push to get the Russian engines out of their line because Russia. It is on par with the venerable RL-10 engine manufactured by Aerojet and will have a thrust of 15,000 pounds or 67 kilonewtons. and be powered by liquid oxygen and liquid methane, or methalox. The fuel choice is partly a nod to the reusable future of space flight. Mueller says Helios could be refilled with propellant and then go on other missions in orbit. Yeah, so okay, so you get this tug into space, and then that tug floats around, and you can refill it if you want, and it can go collect other satellites that are already in space and move them into new orbits. You're a space transportation company, effectively. He's kind of like Guild in Dune. He said that the company is building components of the Deneb engine now and should start testing in March. The company plans to test a full engine build later this summer. So the Helios is intended to debut in 26. Japan launches a spy satellite. So Japan has launched a new optical reconnaissance satellite to boost the country's remote sensing capabilities. How long do we have? All right, I'm probably going to cut this off. What are we at? I'm seeing a warning on my stream. So the stream's current bitrate is lower than we want. I'll have a look at that later. I just want to see how much time we've been here for. "21 minutes? Yeah, so we're going to cut this off after this Japan discussion. So the launch occurred on January 12th. It carried the Optical 8, which is for tracking North Korean military activities. Okay. For satellites, you can only track a certain part of the Earth when you fly over it, which isn't as frequent as people would think, depending on their orbit. Well, what they may have done is sun synchronous with the on an orbit that gives them really good sun, like essentially a really bright time of day for the for viewing North Korean objectives or missions. So tracking North Korean military activity and for civilian purposes, including monitoring natural disasters. Very cool. This was Japan's first launch of the year. So they got out of the gate 24. Took them 19 days or 12 days. So phasing out the HIIA. This is the 48th flight of the HIIA, which has been Japan's workhorse launch vehicle since 2001. So think about that. 48th flight of this rocket since 2001. That's 23 years. And SpaceX has launched Falcon 9, kind of a combo Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy 98 times last year. Almost 2x in 1 year. More than 2x. Just two more IIA rockets being built by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries remain to fly. They will both launch later this year with another SpySat and greenhouse gas absorbing satellites for the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. At some point, we should get into some of these satellites that are monitoring emissions. There are companies that monitor methane emissions, MethaneSat, there's GHG. There are companies that, there are a lot of hyperspectral companies. I won't even get into that now. Planet comes to mind, Wyvern. They're all Earth observation is tricky, but they're all trying to offer a product that can be used for some really good purposes. You know, if you can find methane being emitted out of the hermit kingdoms, you can at least try to ask them to improve their equipment or shut things down. Whereas you could never do that. You can't have someone go in with a land vehicle to North Korea to say, hey, can we check out your oil refinery and make sure it's not leaking too much, unnecessarily leaking too much methane, you know? All right, let's finish off. The new H3 rocket will replace the IIA. The first H3 test flight failed to reach orbit last year, and Japanese engineers are preparing for the second launch, slated February 15th. So we'll keep our eye on that. Thank you very much for sticking around. Have a great day.